Okay, so since we don't have Crystal's monologue today, Kyle picked a topic that him and I are going to discuss. What are we taking a look at, Kyle?
Yeah, so the White House is apparently bracing, this is according to New York Times Business, the White House is bracing lawmakers for a, quote, disappointing estimate from the CBO on the House Democrats' legislation, which is likely to find that the cost of the package will not be fully paid for with new tax revenue. So they're basically saying, hey, listen, I hope all you guys are still for it in the coalition, but this is what we're facing right now. So the director of the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said on Monday that the IRS proposal would yield far less than what the White House was counting on to help pay for its bill, about $120 billion over a decade, versus the White House said, listen, this is $400 billion that we're counting on. So this is it's the accounting tricks, if you will, that the White House used to try to say, hey, it's fully paid for, it's fully paid for. Honestly, and I'm curious to see what you think of this, I find the whole conversation a little silly anyway, because the same people who were demanding that this Build Back Better bill be deficit neutral are the same people who just voted for an infrastructure bill, the traditional infrastructure bill, which added about $250 billion to the deficit.
Yes.
So it just seems like they're looking for anything they possibly can, the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. They're like, I wanted to, but I can't. The other thing is inflation. Joe Biden's like, oh my God, there's inflation, now I can't do it. Well, what he doesn't tell you is inflation is because of the supply chain.
Yes.
It's not necessarily because of the big spending. So he has that mistaken belief, or he knows it's not true, but he's using that as the excuse because he didn't want to vote for it anyway.
Yeah, Crystal and I were talking about this at the time. The biggest the most foolish thing that the progressives did is they said, well, we're going to vote for it pending the CBO score for our moderate colleagues. And Crystal and were like, I've been around town for a while. I remember, here's what happened during the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. The Republicans were like, the CBO score. The CBO came out and scored it as way less deficit neutral or whatever than they said. And they said, screw the CBO, we don't care. And then they just published their own report from like the Joint Committee on Taxation or whatever, saying that it was, and then they just passed it, saying, actually, this is all that really matters. I knew, and I think Crystal did as well, that the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, which does this scoring, was not necessarily going to score it in the way that the White House wanted. They almost never do. That's their job, by the way. And so when you have that happen, now Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, and others have the out if they want it, right, Kyle?
They want
it. Or at the very least, what they can say is, well, that's what. How much is that? 280 billion now.
Strip that out.
That's going to be. So they're going to point to a program and just say, kill it.
Gone.
And that's going to be the one thing, necessarily that a donor maybe wanted out, or they were opposed to, or whatever in the first place. And that is just the 200 billion that we know of on the IRS proposal. There is no guarantee that they score some of their other taxes in the same way. This is really important for people to understand. A lot of the money and stuff that they say, unless it's verified by somebody like the Tax Foundation or whatever, don't believe a word of what they say, because they game it and try and make it apply to more people than it might necessarily. Their job is to actually make it look how it actually would in practice. But, to the deficit politics, look, you're right. I mean, the Pentagon, nobody cares if that's deficit spending, right? The Iraq War, Afghanistan, it's all good. We'll borrow as much money as possible. Whenever it comes to social spending, everybody cares about the deficit again. So I agree. It's ridiculous.
And the way the media discusses this is so incredibly dishonest, because when they talk about military spending, they give you what it is annually. Right. They give you that number.
700 something.
When they were talking about Build Back Better, and I'm guilty of this as well, I didn't realize this until after the fact, when they said that $3.5 trillion number, that was over a decade.
Yeah, it was a 10-year.
And so it shows they're like subtly gaming the way that you interpret these things. And bottom line is, listen, progressives got totally played. And I said on my show, I wouldn't even vote for this $1.75 trillion package. Period. The only way I would vote for that is if progressives also got commitments from Biden on executive orders.
Yeah.
Because I think the bill was so watered down, so ridiculous. As we discussed today, it's even more ridiculous than I had realized. The fact that now there's tax cuts for the wealthy in there, and now we're talking about, a child care system that's basically a complete scam. So I look at it and say, there's no way I'm voting for that. The only way I would have is if Joe Biden signed an executive order to abolish student debt, which of course he's not going to do. If Joe Biden signed an executive order to free every nonviolent drug offender in the entire country, signed an executive order to change marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 5, I would have given Joe Biden a list of like 10 things and said, listen, here are my demands. I will not vote for this as a left congressperson unless you meet this. Don't even come talk to me unless you're going to do some of these things. And progressives not only didn't do that, they didn't stick by their original word of we're going to keep the bills linked together. Twice they did that, but then finally, when there's just a little bit of pressure, Joe Manchin gives a press conference and wags his finger at them. And they're like, okay, you're right. We're going to delink them, and we're going to trust that Biden got them behind the scenes to do the right thing, even though publicly Manchin was like, I am not going to do the right thing. I'm not in favor of this bill.
I still can't believe that they did that. I honestly think it's crazy that they just buckled so openly. And they're like, yeah, but the CBO will come forward. It was like, are you crazy? I mean, are you like a novice here? You know, any basic observer of general legislative politics could have told you that this was gonna happen. It happens to every single bill. They get scored in a way outside of the partisan system. That's how it works. So look, I'm glad you picked this. It is very important. It just goes to show you like both how full of it they were in their promise and a big preview of what's to come. From what I'm hearing on the calendar, this thing is still very far from actually coming to passage. In terms of the legislative stuff, could be looking well into December, not before Thanksgiving. And that's a lot of time. The more time you have, the more stuff that gets chopped, the closer you get to some Christmas deadline vote where people are forced to vote for it in the House. And there we go.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.